Have you ever noticed someone suddenly growing cold toward you? A friend withdrawing without reason? A colleague who once admired you now undermining you? Or someone close beginning to treat you with quiet resentment? It's a deeply confusing experience. You replay every interaction, searching for what you might have done wrong, yet nothing makes sense. But what if their hostility isn't really about you? What if it's about something hidden within them? Something you unknowingly awakened? Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist and founder of analytical psychology, offered one of the most powerful explanations for this phenomenon through his concept of the shadow self. The idea that people often reject not what they see in you, but what they secretly see of themselves reflected through you. This invisible psychological process is what makes some people suddenly start to dislike, resent, or even hate you. Not because you have harmed them, but because your presence mirrors the parts of themselves they cannot bear to face. This essay explores that silent, psychological war, how the shadow, authenticity, power dynamics, and envy intertwine to shape human relationships in unseen ways. The hidden source of hostility. At first glance, when someone turns against us, it's easy to assume we are at fault. Maybe we said something wrong or failed in some way. But Jung's insight reminds us that often, hostility stems not from our actions, but from what we represent. Every person carries within them a shadow, the dark, unacknowledged part of the psyche that holds repressed emotions, shame, fears, and desires. These are traits people deny or bury because they threaten their self-image. However, the shadow never disappears. It waits quietly in the unconscious, influencing behavior in subtle and sometimes destructive ways. When you embody qualities that someone has rejected in themselves, such as confidence, kindness, or freedom, you unknowingly act as a mirror for their unintegrated shadow. They don't consciously realize it, but your presence makes them uncomfortable because it exposes something they've hidden. For instance, your confidence might highlight their insecurity. Your compassion might remind them of their cruelty. Your freedom might reveal the invisible chains they've locked themselves into. They are not truly seeing you. They are seeing themselves reflected in you. The shadow's projection. Why they attack the mirror. When the shadow surfaces, it creates emotional tension. Instead of confronting it, many people project it outward. They believe the problem lies with you, not within them. This projection transforms you into a symbol of what they can't face. In psychological terms, projection is a defense mechanism. It's easier to attack an external enemy than to face an inner truth. So, rather than acknowledging their insecurity, they accuse you of arrogance. Rather than confronting their laziness, they call you controlling. You become the mirror they want to shatter, not because of who you are, but because your presence threatens their illusion of self. This explains why people can turn hostile without provocation. They are fighting their own reflection, not you. Understanding this frees you from unnecessary guilt. When you see clearly, you realize they're not rejecting your essence. They're rejecting their own. The mirror within, your own shadow. However, Jung's wisdom applies both ways. Just as others project their shadow onto you, you too carry your own. The traits that irritate or offend you in others often reflect something unhealed within yourself. For example, if you despise arrogance in someone, it might hint at your buried desire to feel seen or valued. If laziness frustrates you deeply, perhaps you fear being perceived as unproductive or weak. Recognizing this doesn't mean tolerating toxic behavior, but it invites you to practice self-awareness. When you look honestly at what triggers you, you begin to integrate your shadow rather than project it. This process of integration, facing and accepting your hidden aspects, is how true self-mastery begins. The threat of authenticity. Authenticity is one of the most disarming yet threatening qualities a person can possess. To be authentic means to live without masks, to speak with your true voice, and to act according to your inner values, not societal expectations. While authenticity feels liberating for the person living it, it can be deeply unsettling for those around them. Why? Because authenticity exposes falsehood. It challenges the comfort of the roles and personas people rely on. Most individuals construct identities that are acceptable and safe: a good employee, a pleasant friend, a dutiful child. These masks protect them from rejection, but also imprison them. When you show up as your genuine self, you unconsciously remind others of the compromises they've made and the truths they've silenced. Your authenticity becomes a silent confrontation. Without saying a word, your presence whispers, "This is who you could be if you stopped pretending." And that message can feel dangerous to those still living behind a mask. Power dynamics and the hidden hierarchies. Beyond the personal shadow, there are also silent power dynamics at play in every relationship. Human connections are rarely equal. There's often an invisible hierarchy of who leads, who validates, and who depends. When you begin to grow, setting boundaries, becoming more confident, or succeeding in your own way, you disrupt this unspoken balance. The person who once felt superior or in control may feel threatened. For example, when you set a boundary, someone who relied on your compliance may perceive it as disrespect. When you succeed, someone who measured their worth against you may feel diminished. When you stop seeking approval, those who fed on your neediness may interpret it as arrogance. Their reaction is not about your behavior. It's about what your growth symbolizes: a loss of control. This is why resentment often appears when you start to change. People who once supported you may begin to subtly undermine you, not because they hate you, but because your independence threatens their hidden sense of power. The mirror effect: how others reflect our inner world. Jung's mirror effect expands on this truth. Every human interaction reflects something about ourselves. What we admire in others often reveals what we aspire to become. What we despise often exposes what we have yet to accept within ourselves. When people admire your courage, it may be because they long to express their own. When they resent your success, it's often because it reflects their own unfulfilled potential. The mirror effect reveals that hatred, admiration, and envy are rarely about the other person. They are about what that person awakens in us. Understanding this transforms your perspective. Instead of personalizing others' reactions, you begin to see them as mirrors showing you deeper truths, both theirs and your own. Envy, the silent poison. Among the emotions that distort human relationships, envy is the most silent and corrosive. It rarely announces itself. Instead, it hides in small behaviors. The friend who stops celebrating your success, the colleague who subtly undermines you, or the loved one who grows distant after you achieve something meaningful. People rarely say, "I envy you." To do so would mean admitting inadequacy, something pride won't allow. So envy disguises itself as indifference, sarcasm, or even criticism. Envy often grows strongest among those closest to us. Strangers can admire your achievements, but friends or family may feel your growth as a personal threat. Your light shines a spotlight on their stagnation. Instead of being inspired, they may retreat into silence or resentment. This silence of envy is one of the most painful experiences of all. You might not be openly attacked, but you feel a subtle withdrawal of warmth, the applause that stops, the messages that go unanswered, the quiet hope that you fail so they can feel relief. Understanding envy as a projection helps you detach from it. Their resentment is not proof of your wrongdoing. It's evidence of their unhealed potential. The courage to stay authentic. Living authentically means accepting that not everyone will like you. In fact, the more genuine you become, the more resistance you might face. People who depend on illusions will perceive your authenticity as rebellion, arrogance, or danger. But authenticity also inspires. Even those who reject it feel its pull, the longing to live freely, truthfully, and without masks. When you live authentically, you plant the seed of freedom in others, even if they resist it at first. Authenticity is contagious. It challenges people to look inward, to question their own false identities. That's why the most authentic people often face both admiration and hostility. They awaken something powerful in others, seeing through the silence. When you understand the hidden forces behind human behavior, the shadow, projection, power, envy, you begin to see life differently. You stop taking things so personally. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. You recognize that the hostility, rejection, or silence you encounter is often not about your flaws, but about what your presence represents to others. You learn to interpret silence not as rejection, but as revelation. Sometimes the quiet withdrawal of others is not punishment. It's their shadow retreating from the light you carry. The freedom of awareness. Once you grasp these psychological dynamics, you gain emotional freedom. You stop being trapped in confusion, wondering why people change toward you. You understand that relationships are mirrors reflecting hidden truths, not all of which are yours to fix. Criticism no longer feels like condemnation. It becomes information. Envy no longer wounds you. It reveals another's pain. Rejection no longer defines you. It exposes the discomfort your authenticity brings to others. Most importantly, you realize that your light, your truth, growth, and freedom may disturb others, but it also inspires transformation in those ready to see it. Conclusion: you are the mirror. In the end, when people suddenly start to hate you, it's often not hatred of you at all. It's a rejection of the reflection you bring into their awareness. You awaken their shadow, disturb their illusion, and remind them of what they've denied within themselves. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." When you live authentically, you make the unconscious visible, both in yourself and in others. And while that truth may provoke resistance, it also sets you free. So the next time someone's warmth turns cold, or their admiration becomes resentment, don't rush to blame yourself. Remember, you may have simply become their mirror, and not everyone is ready to look.